Well, I'll kick it off by welcoming all of our attendees, but also um, bienvenue to our panelists and bonsoir um, uh, to people who are in what 9 p.m. or so, probably going to verge on 10, not too long from now. So um, welcome. So this is the second panel in a series called The Art of Global Protest. This series is really the idea, the creative work of Volha Isakova in CW, Central Washington University's Department of World Languages and Cultures. Our very first panel focused on Belarus. This panel, Protest in St. Valentin, France, from Yellow Vest to Black Lives Matter, will be centered not only in France, but also in Belgium. My name is Hope Amison. So when Volha wanted to begin these conversations, these really important conversations about protest movements happening all over the world, she was wondering if Central Washington University's Museum of Culture and Environment would be a sponsor. And as the director of the museum, I have to say it is an honor to sponsor a series of conversations as timely and as important as these. I do really want to acknowledge some of our sponsors, our other co-sponsors, particularly the Office of the Provost at Central Washington University, as well as the Office of International Studies and Programs. And of course, we are really excited to have contacted Dr. Michael Johnson here to ask him to organize this panel and to welcome Franck and Gilles here to our virtual Central Washington University space. And I'll introduce Dr. Michael Johnson as our esteemed chair and one of my most favorite colleagues of the World Languages and Cultures Department here at Central Washington University. And thank you all attendees for coming today. I'm really looking forward to this conversation and to the types of ideas it provokes. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Hope. I'm unmuted, right? Good. So I also really want to thank Hope Amison and Volha Sakava for organizing this event and this series as a whole. It's the Belarus panel was really eye-opening for me. I learned a lot, and it was fascinating to see the echoes between what's happening in Belarus and other places in the world, like Hong Kong, but also Paris, Brussels, and so on. And I also want to thank all of our sponsors, the Museum of Culture and Environment, the Department of Anthropology and Museum Studies, the Office of International Studies and Programs, and the Office of the Provost. And encourage you guys to mark your calendars for February 12th. Wait, it got moved to the 19th. I'm
It's
sorry.
the 19th, February 19th.
My bad. Sorry. Where we're going to have a panel on global BLM, Global Black Lives Matter, Solidarity Across Borders. And then is it still March 5th, the candlelight protest?
Yes, March
Okay,
5th.
March 5th, the candlelight protest as well. So mark your calendars. I think it's going to be a really exciting series of conversations and exchanges of ideas around protest um, and global solidarity. Let me start by introducing our two speakers. So our first speaker is Franck Barra, who is an activist, author, and film producer, the co-founder of Bark Productions, a film production company created in Brussels in 2019. He's edited books on Noam Chomsky, Ilan Pappé, Ken Loach, and Angela Davis. Was part of the founding team of Festival Ciné Palestine in Paris and Palestine with Love in Brussels. I discovered Franck's work fairly recently when in the middle of a pit of COVID blues, I discovered his COVID-19 Chronicles podcast, which has a huge number of fascinating interviews with activists and artists, doctors, and other people around the world who are encountering this intersection of public health policy, activism, and just lived experience. Really interesting and highly recommended. And our second speaker, I'll introduce in advance. Franck is going to speak first and then Gilles next. Gilles Bruno is the founder and editor-in-chief of L'Observatoire des Médias, a media watch organization that has had more of its fair share of work lately. He also works as the pedagogical coordinator for the École des métiers de l'information, and brings the perspective of a journalist to this moment where journalism is experiencing some real challenges in France in particular. So I'm going to try to share a slide show with you really quickly, and bear with me here. Okay. Okay. And I just want to show you a few pictures to illustrate some of what's going on in France. So first of all, want to bring attention to the Gilets jaunes. We've read a lot about the Gilets jaunes demonstrations in the US. And I have to say, I think the media coverage in the US has been fairly confusing and confused. It's hard to make sense of French politics through the lens of US politics. But this was an unprecedented number of people. I'm gonna switch, I have a, let's see, yeah, an unprecedented level of police violence not seen since the protests in May '68. And it brought attention to police violence in a way that really hadn't been looked at closely before then, even though, of course, police violence had been experienced by people of color in France for many years. Probably those of you who remember 2005, that there was a really important example of police violence that led to protests and anti-racist movements that created a kind of series of anti-racist protests that have kind of led us to where we are today. Just to show you some examples of the degree of state violence that and police violence that we see here, particularly prominent in visual representations were the images of protesters, yellow vest protesters, who had experienced rubber bullets in the eyes. So a number of people lost eyes, lost eyesight, and you see this image on the top left here showing that. We also have journalists were able to capture some pretty powerful images of police engaging in what does not look like a peaceful keeping of the order, but instead something that looks a lot more kind of personal and violent. We've also seen a number of laws being evoked or invoked in France, including a law that prohibits people from being critical of the police. And so it's been interpreted that the simple act of documenting police violence is enough to invoke that law. And so we have a number of images of journalists whose cameras are taken away. This image on the top right is actually from a more recent protest. There's a new law being proposed in France called the Global Security Law, which Gilles might be able to touch on for a little bit. And in response to that, a number of journalists have been arrested and experienced different forms of violence. I'm going to jump to this image. There are a couple really, if you are able to read French and you want to delve into the scholarship on state violence and police in France, I recommend either Didier or both Didier Fassin's La Force de l'Ordre. He actually he shadowed the Brigade Anticriminalité for 15 months and produced this really interesting anthropological study of the police, and we see a really close look at specifically the kind of the kind of us them attitudes that emerge. Mathieu Rigouste, a little bit more recently, wrote a book called La Domination Policière, which kind of gives us a genealogy of the Brigade Anticriminalité and the police forces that are used to keep peace in the neighborhoods that are predominantly populated by migrant populations and immigrant populations. And Rigouste's book kind of traces this genealogy back to the 1970s kind of colonial policing tactics and how those have made their way into contemporary French policing tactics. And so we have here just an image of, I love this image on the left, Nique la BAC, which just means fuck the police, essentially, but referring to that specific Brigade Anticriminalité. And we see the badge on the right here of the Brigade Anticriminalité, kind of showing the symbolics that are imagined as part of what justifies the practice of maintaining order in these zones. So I'm gonna just stop there. I really just wanted to share a couple interesting photos so you could get a visual. And now I'm very curious to hear from our guests what is going on in France and Belgium. So Franck, I will pass the virtual mic over to you.
Thanks, Mike, and good evening, everyone. I think you can all see us, but we can't see you, so I'm just waving at you anyway. Thanks for the introduction, Mike. I will focus on Belgium. I'm French, but I've lived in Belgium for about 7 years now, and I will actually talk about something that happened last Sunday. So to show you how, because it's funny, I feel like in Belgium, we were looking at France only like 6 months ago, saying, look how bad things are in France, look how violent the police is. And I could hear, here and there, people saying, oh, Belgian police is so much better than the French police and stuff. But I really feel like in the last few months, reality has hit us in the face in a very strong way. So last Sunday, you had a demonstration in central Brussels, which was against what people see as a racist justice system. So this demonstration was, and that's a new thing, because of COVID rules, and I mean, that's something we can talk about maybe in the questions after. We are under a state of emergency, but in terms of health, but it's still a state of emergency. So with the COVID rules, most demonstrations now are tolerated in Belgium. So that's what the cops and stuff say. It's tolerated, but it's not legal. So it creates a blur because you're not sure what tolerated means, and the police really plays with that. They arrest people and say, look, this is tolerated, but it's not legal, so you're arrested. So anyway, on Sunday, central Brussels, very small demonstration, actually, about 150 people turned up, a lot of minors, so under 18. Actually, a lot of people were like 14, 15 years old with their parents. After 45 minutes, oh, sorry, I forgot to say something. So about 150 demonstrators, 300 riot police for the demonstration, with water cannons, dogs, just a crazy show of force and of power by the state and the police. So this demonstration, after 45 minutes, the police started to kettle people. I don't know if you say this in the US, but it's a tactic, a police tactic of kettling. It came from the UK. So kettling means you just, there's people here, and you just go all around them and you just block them as if they were in a kettle and they can't get out. It's called la nasse en français, but it's kettling tactic by the police. So the police altogether arrested 245 people. Remember, 155 demonstrators, 245 arrests. In these 245 people arrested and actually taken to the police station, 86 were minors, under 18, but also 14 and 15 years old. I'm working closely with lawyers. We've got 10, 20, 30, 50 written testimonies of incredible violence by the police. Physical violence, abuse, like racist abuse in terms of verbal abuse, and the poor kids, I mean the minors, the law says that if you arrest a minor, you have to call his parents or her parents straight away. Some minors stayed in jail, like for 6 hours before the parents were called. We've got testimonies of, the police separated the adults and the kids in different cells. And by the way, we obviously under COVID rules, but there were up to 35 people in one cell. So, just like sardines, right? And testimonies, people have testified that the police entered the cells without wearing masks, which is also quite bad in terms of what's happening now. So the police separated the adults and the minors in 2 different cells. And at one point, one police officer entered the cell where the minors were, and just 3 other police officers came into the cell, and they started to bash someone, hitting like knee in the face, slapping him on the floor, etc. And they left. And this apparently continued for 6 to 8 hours. A few hours after everybody was released, and that's also very important, they arrested 245 people. Everybody was released without even being reprimanded. So they had no way. We had the mayor, let's say, of this commune in Brussels, so like the council, let's say, that gave a press conference. And when journalists asked him, how can you accept, and how did you decide, and why did you tell the police to disproportionately be violent in such a way? And he said, because we knew that eventually people were going to riot, break and burn things. We knew that eventually they were going to break and burn things. So in a way, he validated a preemptive attack on minors, on people, including minors, because potentially they were going to break things in Brussels. And that's something that is very worrying. When you get to the point that the police and the local mayor or whatever councillor can justify incredible violence, documented violence from the police, because potentially some people are going to break things. I think in terms of the democratic process, that's something we're going to have to look into very, very hard. The good thing is people are getting organized. People have been shocked by what happened on Sunday. Parents and others are sticking together to potentially take the state to court. So that's a positive. But I'm just giving this example because this was just on Sunday. But 10 days previously, a young 23 years old Belgian of African origin called Ibrahima Bari was arrested by police because he was filming them. He was filming them arresting somebody else. And filming the police is still not legal in Belgium. You can film the police. He was arrested. He's a 23 years old soccer player. He entered the police station and he never left. I mean, he left, but as a dead man. The police said he had a heart attack. There's still obviously stuff ongoing. So following this death, another death, because in the last few months only, actually in the last 2 years, Mauda, a 2-year-old Kurdish girl, was killed, shot in the head by a police officer. Adil, just when the lockdown started, was killed by a police car who drove into him. Mehdi was also killed by a police car. And after Ibrahima was killed, so that was only 10 days ago, so back now 5 days ago, Ilyes, a young Algerian who was without papers in Belgium, also was arrested by police, entered the police station, had a brain, like internal bleeding from the brain, and died. The police said, we thought he was sleeping. And again, there's obviously an investigation going on. So we are seeing, and in France, but also in Belgium and in Italy and in Spain, all around Europe, a level of repression, I think, unseen in recent years, using also COVID new sort of laws or rules, but also because, and I think that's a few questions you sent me, Michael, also because there is, you were talking about the links between the US struggles, Black Lives Matter, and sort of a new wave of decolonization. Such a new wave is happening. And obviously, because such a new wave is happening, the repression has to be tenfold, because the state here cannot accept that a potential social justice struggle can win. I mean, we know this from history, right? The US is organizing coup all over the world because they cannot have a socialist revolution in Latin America, right? Because once an example is set, it can create a precedent, and other people can be inspired by it. So I think what's happening now is like you have a space for dissent, a space for the right of assembly that is shrinking. I don't think it's even shrinking. I think it's slowly disappearing. One thing also we have to keep in mind, and we organized an event yesterday actually with the sister of Ibrahima, who was killed 10 days ago, and others, is that what we're seeing now is in fact the tip of the iceberg, because white folks are now being touched by police violence, but that's violence that Black and brown folks, people from the poor neighborhood, have known and have acknowledged for many, many years. So there's an issue now about how to transform this, what's happening, and the anger that is really real in terms of the population into something more concrete, and something that will create sort of a broad social justice movement. Michael, how long have I been talking for? I've lost. I can't hear you anyway, but I think, as Gilles was saying before we're live, the question and answers is going to be very interesting. So I'm sort of going to wrap up by saying that there is also an exportation of 4 minutes, right, of what we see in terms of the tactics used in Ferguson during the Black Lives Matter process, this sort of militarization of the police that is very real. It's also happening here in Belgium. During the demonstration in solidarity with the family of Ibrahima, Belgian police use water cannons and flashball and this tactic of kettling. And this is very new. I mean, I've been in Belgium for 7 years. I've taken part in demonstrations. The police has been violent, but the use of flashball in demonstration is really pretty recent. I'm still working, but I worked for many years on the Palestine issue, and I've visited Palestine and Israel many times. I've taken part in demonstration in Palestine, and the use of tear gas, of sand bombs, of rubber bullets is common use over there. But seeing it arrive here, you realize there is this, this model, or this new model of what we potentially can still call democracies, being exported all around the world. And I think that the shrinking space I was talking about for dissent and for civil society, I've actually worked on a report that is in French and in English, that is titled On Shrinking Space, with the Transnational Institute in Amsterdam. We actually showed that the shrinking space has many layers. So there's police repression, There's also the fact that if you're a small charity working on social justice, it's getting harder and harder to have access to a bank account. It's getting harder and harder to have access to funds from organizations. We can see also, like we've seen in Russia and in Israel, for example, that NGOs that are challenging the state are being barred from getting public funds. And we're seeing that this disappearing space for dissent is actually something that, if we still care about the democratic process and as sort of citizen of various states around the world, we've got to organize against, because what's happening now, if we don't keep our eyes open, and in terms of the law of emergency laws against COVID or against, they'll still be with us forever. And that's something, and I think I'll wrap up with this. I was talking to a lawyer yesterday who was telling me, remember after the terrorist attack in France, Charlie Hebdo and Bastille and Bataclan, and the terrorist attack in Brussels, in the airport and the underground, the tube, what do you call that, the metro system, we saw the emergency powers arrive, and laws, and I'm saying laws because they were not passed, when it's an emergency power, you don't have to go through the parliament to pass laws. That because we didn't have our eyes open, they're still present today. I mean, the laws have become part of the new justice system when they were supposed to be only a response to terrorism. So I'm not saying I'm pessimistic. I think I want to be optimistic, and I want to say that you can see a lot of organizing, a lot of solidarity all over. I mean, Black Lives Matter protests here in Belgium are drawing, hundreds, thousands of people as well. But the pushback from the state and the security apparatus, the police, is very real, and it's going to have to be challenged. Thank you.
Thank you, Franck. So our next speaker is Gilles Bruno. So we're going to go from Brussels to Paris.
Do you hear me? Yes. Okay, so I wanted to complete the presentation by you, Michael. Before creating l'Observatoire des médias, like MediaWatch.com, before creating this, I used to work at newspaper Libération, which it's a daily newspaper, more to the left, politically speaking. But I was not a journalist at this time. I was taking care about the IT and web projects. And what I wanted to say is that with my website, I have some contributors, and one of them is Jean-Marie Charon, which is a sociologue des médias, very well known in France. And for many years, he's using my platform to write. And when the Gilets jaunes demonstrations have been in France, all over France, obviously all the media journalists and sociologists tried to watch what was the work of how was to be a journalist in France in 2018, 19, and 20. And so we look at that very, very carefully. For example, when we had some demonstration in France, I was not on the field, but I was on the digital field with many screens. One screen with the Hideous BFM TV, which is a 24 hours news channel. Then the horrifical RT France, which is the Russian TV French antenna, and also Rémi Buzine, which is a young journalist who was working for a new media called Brut. And he made live transmission with Periscope and Twitter Live and Facebook Live, etc. And he was live, I don't know, for 5 hours during the same day. The difference between all the, so with these 3 screens, I could have 3 different type of coverings. The most strange one was the one from RT France. Why? Because it was not a journalistic eye. The eye of RT France, as you may know, is more than, it's more an eye on the mess. If there is a demonstration, if there is a struggle, if there is an accident, if there is something going really bad in France, then they're going to talk about. And why I say it was not journalistic, because there was no comment at all. You had about RT France, you had 2 different coverings. One was without any comments. So the journalist who is handling the camera is not explaining what is going on. He's not giving any context. He's not saying this guy just did that and the other guy just did that. So it's in a certain way, it's kind of dangerous. In the other way, it gives you some images maybe you couldn't find elsewhere. Brut is a new media. They began with doing short videos like AG+, and Rémi Buzine went on the field with the Gilets jaunes, and there was a real phenomenon about him. Why? Because as he was always in the demonstrations and filming the Gilets jaunes, giving the word to the Gilets jaunes and not cutting them and letting them talk, maybe sometimes too much, because we could see some of them talking and saying conspirationist things and far right sentences, etc. But Rémi Buzine was giving some context. He was explaining what he was doing. He was explaining what just happened. He was filming himself. He was talking to the police. He was alive, and he was doing a real journalist work and a new journalist work, because none of the classical news TV channels were doing this job. And the result, as a matter of fact, some month afterwards, we could say month, but we used to say we were not counting in month, we were counting in demonstrations, Saturday after Saturday after Saturday. And what happened was that Rémi Buzine became like a star, like an icon for the Gilets jaunes, because he was the one who was not cutting the word, who was not editing. So that was a real problem because at the end, some journalists doing a real good job from many TV channels or video journalists from newspapers, because obviously all newspapers are doing video now. And they began to be unable to work on the field if they were keeping their brand on their mic. I mean, if BFM TV was going on the field, it was dangerous for them because the people were pointing at them like, oh, BFM TV, you're doing crap and you're lying on your channel, etc. And that was kind of violent. Okay. In the same moment, I have to say that BFM TV on the coverage of the demonstration was not at all. I mean, if I could give a vote, not to the coverage, I will say it was good at 60%, and 60 is not good. But so that was a problem about making the difference between some category of journalists and the other ones. And the problem is that we face up that it was a problem of what is information. I mean, the people on the field demonstrating, they could not, they were not understanding well what was the work of a journalist. And the work of a journalist is not giving a free mic for 30 minutes to someone. No, it's taking the word of this person and taking the word of another person and then doing a mix, an editing, and then doing a reportage. And this is the work of the journalist. But as soon as the images were edited, it was like, this is not good. You're not showing what happened before. You're not showing what happened afterwards. So it's blurry and you're not doing your work. So this was pretty tough. And the result was that many journalists, video journalists, going on the field in France, in Paris, in 2019, were going not alone, but with an escort guy. And that was really strange for many of them. And really strange for young journalists. Obviously, the newsrooms used to send young journalists on the field for these demonstrations. So that was kind of tough for them. So after all these coverages, we had to think about what happened in France, obviously. And obviously, there was a problem with the police. That's obvious. And if I could, so I could talk about many things that happened with the police. What happened was David Dufresne, that you know. Alors, David Dufresne, I know him for many years because he was working as well as a journalist at Libération. And David Dufresne began to document the exactions, the bad things that the police made on manifestants, demonstrators, with one hashtag was Allo Place Beauvau. Allo, allo, and Place Beauvau, it's like saying saying where is the interior minister geographically in Paris. In Paris, le ministère de l'Intérieur sits in Place Beauvau. So when you say Place Beauvau, you're saying the Minister of the Interior. So Allo Place Beauvau was like, toc, 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 knock, knock, knock. This happened. And this hashtag went so famous. And it was a real work from David Dufresne. And he gathered many, many tweets, many videos coming from many sources. He was doing a real journalistic work by verifying these videos. And he made many things with these images. I'm going to share my screen, if I may. Partager l'écran. Yeah, I think it's this one. Yes. Do you see my screen? So after he shared on Twitter many Allo Place Beauvau tweets, then Mediapart called him and say, well, you're doing a nice work there. Let's do a data visualizations about your work. And this is one of the main pages of the work from David Dufresne in Mediapart. I'm going to share you on the chat this converser, wait, fenêtre modifier, voir, afficher la conversation. Hop. So this is the page I'm on. And so as you may see, it's data here in red. So it's a data article. And afterward, he made a movie also with many images, his images, his own images, and images from other people. So the problem with the police acts was real, was documented, but we sometimes in France we are used to see only the recent events and not the old ones. But obviously we have to go in 1968, and in 1968 also the police was hugely violent. 1968. So unfortunately, it's not new, but we are not in the same age. We're not in the same world, I must say. So I'm not as pessimistic as Franck, because obviously we have the journalists that are working, I hope, quite well in France. But within the state also, there is some pieces of hope. And this hope for me is les commissions d'enquête. And les commissions d'enquête, you have two types of commissions d'enquête. The one coming from the Assemblée nationale, with the deputies, and the commission d'enquête coming from the Senate, deputies, Senate, Parliament. And as all of them are not guided by people from the same political party of Emmanuel Macron, some of them are quite independent. And for example, I wanted to show you this. Wait, it's coming. Do you see my screens? You see LCP. So LCP is La Chaîne Parlementaire. It's the TV station of the Assemblée Nationale, okay? And this is the website. And here you see limitation of the LBD, so LBD for lanceur de balles de défense, so these huge plastic bullets, limitation du LBD en manifestation, réforme de l'IGPN. IGPN is the police of the police, so the police controlling the police. And the problem with IGPN is that IGPN today is controlled by the Ministère de la Justice. It's not totally independent. And so these two things, which are quite huge, are some of the proposals of la commission d'enquête sur le maintien de l'ordre. So it's really recent because we're talking about Wednesday, okay? And la commission d'enquête a fait 35 propositions, made 35 proposals, and within you have the restrictions of the use of LBD. And so there are some hopes about things that could change for the future, okay? First of all, there is this. Afterwards, I must say that Franck is right about the government using the pandemic to do things that I mean, you should not do that. And some examples I'm going to show you on Twitter. Where is it? Yeah, first of all, to show you that it's not over in France, tomorrow, you're gonna have in many places in France, again, some demonstrations, which is kind of strange. Why? Because you have the pandemic and the pandemic is going high. Jean Castex, the first prime minister, just announced half an hour ago, not a new lockdown. He could, but just reinforcement of the laws and the not semi-lockdown. And so we should stay at home, but in the same way, we are in France and demonstrations are okay and you can demonstrate. So, pour le retrait total de la loi sécurité globale, to make the project of the global security law project withdrawal, rendezvous à Mulhouse tomorrow. And here you can see.
Gilles, I'm sorry to interrupt. We're running up against time, and we need.
Oh my goodness!
We need to have some time for questions and answers.
Yeah, I just wanted to finish to show you just one quick thing.
Okay.
What I just began with is the work with Jean-Marie Charon. We did this. So this is my website, l'Observatoire des médias. And we published on the website many articles about this, and we call that Informer sur le mouvement des Gilets jaunes. And we did this in many cities. Rouen, then here Paris, then Lyon, Toulouse, Nantes, and Lille. So all of this was gathering some journalists, make them talk about their work during Gilets jaunes demonstrations and how their work dramatically changed with that. And then we made these articles. Sorry to have been too prolix.
No worries. So so Franck has to leave in about 5 minutes. So about 10 minutes. Okay, we can stretch it to 10 minutes. So if we're going to open the floor to questions. There's a Q&A button that you're welcome to use. Well, I can start with just a question. So I've been very interested in observing the media, and in the U.S. We have various ways of measuring bias in journalism, and I'm curious because your approach, and this is actually a question for Gilles, is to think about actually good journalism as necessarily involving a certain amount of point of view, right? The journalist has to be present in a certain way. And in fact, covering events in a way that's completely decontextualized can produce these sort of like Russian television, this RT effect that sensationalizes and commodifies the news as a product and not as a way of informing people. So just, I'm curious if France and Belgium, are there ways of measuring bias in the news, and how are they, how does that work?
What you mean? How? I don't understand very well your question, Michael.
Well, I'm pretty sure that basically any time in the measures of bias and bias in news in the U.S., a number of I guess I'm trying to point out a difference between the U.S. approach to journalism and a European approach, and that any kind of editorializing on the part of the journalist immediately will push that journalist or the newspaper they represent or the organization they represent into one left bias, right bias, and so on.
Yeah.
I find that problematic. I think actually the bias chart is kind of problematic in the US.
There is, I mean, these late month and not month, but some years, we have a real problem with news channels in France. And we have a problem that is not political, it's about money. Why? It's because one of these channels have been acquired by Vincent Bolloré, which is a media mogul. He's he detains Vivendi, huge media group, and he bought one channel which name was iTélé, and he was the boss, and he detained Canal Plus, and he changed iTélé in CNews, and he changed all the staff, quite all the staff. There was a strike because he tried to, not he tried, he enrolled a guy that has a suspicion of, I mean, not pedophilia, but doing some castings with young boys and blah, blah, blah. So it was kind of so weird and so not good. And so there was a strike, 2 weeks of strike. And then this was in 2016. And since 2016, this news channel became a mess and became an open channel to populism. And so, in one hand, you had BFM TV, which was a 24 hours news channel, okay? Not doing so well his job, sometimes was doing his job. But about CNews, it has been a real mess,
Mhm.
and doing what we called les tautologues, which means if you want to do a cheap news channel, you're not sending people on the field because it costs money. You're just doing talk shows with many people talking against and fighting on the screen. It costs nothing and it makes high rates viewing of viewing, and this is a mess. So in France, we are fighting against that. Many of us are fighting against that, but we have to change maybe the law because
Right.
we are not as free speech as in USA, as you may know. So this is the huge difference.
Thank you. Yeah, that sounds like a very American problem. So we have a question, a few good questions that popped up. We have one from Eva, who's asking, Franck, could you elaborate on the new wave of decolonization that you mentioned in your talk? And what does that look like in the European context?
Actually, if it's okay with you, viewers and organizers, I see there's like 4 questions. I can give like a quick answer on a few of them, and then leave Gilles to answer the rest, or to actually complement what I'm saying. I think by the time I'll have finished answering them, it'll probably be time for me to go. Unfortunately, I'd planned, for this to finish like about now. So yeah, Eva. So when I talked about a new wave of decolonization, I'm talking about the processes we are actually seeing internationally all around the world. I'm talking in a way decolonization of the arts, decolonization of the institutions, decolonization of the classroom, the question and the debate around white privilege, what it means, in the US, but also what it means in Belgium. In a way, you had the wave of decolonization and as you hopefully know, Belgium is a former colonial power. So you had the waves of decolonization in the 60s in Africa. But I think what we're seeing now with the Black Lives Matter movement and other movement, the LGBTQI movement is more like what I was talking about is more like a decolonization of the mind, really, and of the privileges that some people enjoy and others don't. And actually, this in a way answers also Veronica questions about police in Belgium moving towards more violent tactics. So in one hand, they do, but on the other hand, it's actually violent tactics that that the police has been using towards Black and brown folks, towards less privileged people, towards poor neighborhood for decades. But we're seeing now the same tactics used against pretty much the whole population. And I think that as far as an explanation for this movement, it's directly linked to the decolonization of the mind that I was talking about, and the realization that, and even more so when you're in times of crisis, when we're under COVID, that things are not right for most people. We're talking about the 99% versus the 1%. We've seen that throughout the COVID crisis, about 5 billionaires made more money than ever made, including Amazon and Google and Facebook and the rest. And I think the realization that by a lot of the people throughout the Gilets jaunes and other movements, this is happening, and that this is a society that is actually not equal for all, is actually making people going down in the streets. And because people are going down the streets, the police and the state and the whole question of what is the role of the police in today's democracies, is it about protecting its citizens, or is it about protecting power and protecting institutions and protecting corporations? And that's a question that actually I can answer easily. But what we're seeing is that, yeah, they do protect corporations. And actually often in demonstration, when they talk about the casseurs in French, so the rioters, the few hundreds people, sometimes tens people that break windows, break cars, etc. You often find, and actually in Belgium too, following the death of Ibrahima, a Belgian deputy say the death of Ibrahima is problematic, but the people breaking everything in Brussels the next day was also problematic. So she put on an equal sort of level the death of a man and a few broken windows in Brussels. And that's also in terms of, because, I mean, we've got to be honest, most of the people who die in jail and in police stations are people that are coming from immigration background from, Northern Africa. You never find a white man that dies in a cell. Actually, in the last 10 years, there hasn't been one. So that can explain that. And quickly, do I perceive the protest in Europe as being more violent than those in the US? That's Scott Robinson. No, I don't think they are more violent. I think, sometimes one protest will be more violent, but the other one will be less violent. I think we're seeing the same sort of internationally. And I don't see the media acting differently. If we're talking about the corporate or mainstream media, I think it's behaving in a very bad way all over. I mean, the lies following police brutality, following the coverage of demonstrations, where you only see the violence of 10 demonstrators. They hardly comment on the violence of the police, is the same in the US as in France. Yeah, I think, and practical solutions, I think we've got to unite. We've got to, like when minors are victims of police violence, the parents have to come together and together have to go and face the state, because the more you are, the better chance you have to succeed. And you see this in the demonstration or in a court of law. So yeah, that's my 2 cents. And Michael and Hope, I'm very sorry, but I'm gonna have to go in about like 20 seconds.
Thank you so much, Franck. That was really very useful.
Merci, Gilles. Merci, Michael. Thanks, everyone. And hopefully speak to you soon.
Okay.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Ciao.
Bye.
Thank you.
What I could say, Michael, can I add something?
Please.
Well, there was something quite huge for us. That was, we lived some very tough demonstrations in France with Gilets jaunes, with casseurs, rioters, real rioters, infiltrating the demonstrations and breaking many things and blah blah blah. And then we had the 6th of January in the Senate in the US. And the French people, we were looking at the Senate in the US like, what the heck? What is going on there? That was, it was, I mean, that was so huge. And so it is very strange, because when it happened, it was like, okay, This is happening in the US, but it's not going to happen in France. I mean, looking at that, we knew that the Gilets jaunes or other people, they may be violent, they may hate Emmanuel Macron, but Emmanuel Macron is not Donald Trump. And Emmanuel Macron was not lying and making fun and depreciating the French like um, Donald Trump did to the American people. So, so it was really strange. And about you were talking about do I have more 2 minutes or not? Yes. And about the French coverage of these riots in the US and the capital. So when it happened in the US, it was like 10 p.m. in France, 10 p.m., 10:30. We were all the people, all the journalists, we were on Twitter and with American channels and blah, blah, blah. And then I made a joke on Twitter and I said to my followers, okay, guys, let's calm down. Let's go to bed and let's see how CNews, the bad news channels I was talking about, let's see how CNews tomorrow morning with Jean-Marc Morandini, which is the guy Itélé was making a strike against his arrival in the news channel. And I said, let's see how Jean-Marc Morandini is going to analyze what just happened in the Capitol. And that was a really ironical sentence, okay? So the day after, I didn't looked at the Jean-Marc Morandini show, but afterwards I did. I looked at it. And even if what happened in the Capitol was really fresh, and you had to be on all American news channel, and you had to be on really precise Twitter accounts of journalists, American journalists, to be able to analyze what really happened. But this news channel in France did not do this job. And when I looked at the show, guess who they called to analyze what happened in the Capitol? They asked to a far right political guy to come in their plateau, in the set, to talk about that. And what this guy talked about was a real mess. He said on this news channel, yes, what happened is the fault of the deep state. So that was really a mess in the US, but also a mess about how French news channel were going to analyze this. And when you're not doing real work, you cannot inform well your viewers. Do we have a question?
Yes, actually, there are a few questions, but specifically, Josie has a question that originally was posed to Franck, but was hoping that you both would be able to address the question, sort of the second from the bottom.
Alors, Jose, I am concerned. So I am concerned about the shrinking space suppression free speech in the US by mainstream media and big tech private companies that have increased rapidly over the past month. Do you think that this suppression is dangerous because it keeps people different views from coming together to talk about solution to discrimination and equal justice? You talking about um, uh, could Josie be more precise about which suppression of this free speech in the US? Michael?
Let's see here. Josie could chime back in on the Q&A because that is a pretty big question.
Yes, but before answering, I would like to know um, if you're talking about the banning of the Twitter account of Donald Trump. It's another question.
Right.
So
And here we're in the territory of U.S. concept of free speech, which is
yes, but
very,
yeah,
very different from the French and
yeah,
European.
yeah, yeah. But
free speech.
you know, I'm quite mad guy, and I'm following like more than 11,000 people on Twitter, and many of them are journalists from the US. So I'm quite aware about what is happening about the news in the US, but I would like again this question to be precise. Is Josie still here?
Josie did ask specifically about the canceling of social media accounts. But you know, I mean, I might give an example as well. When we
Yes.
went to promote this event, I mentioned this earlier. We're not actually allowed to promote any events on at least Facebook and Instagram that are about social issues. So, you know, so there's another example as well. But specifically, Josie has said the canceling of social media accounts.
Well, the canceling of social media accounts is, for me, it's not, I'm sorry, but for me, it's not a real matter of free speech. It's a matter of economy, and it's a matter of the famous question, which is Facebook or is Twitter or is Instagram a media or not? And are they media or aren't they media? They earn a lot of money, but do they spend enough money about moderation? No. So as you know, when one account is banned, usually it's because a group of people decide to attack this account by reporting this account. They go in a private channel like a Telegram signal, or I don't know, and they say, okay, this guy made a tweet and I don't like this tweet. Let's make him banned. And then the problem is that uh, Twitter or Facebook, they cannot, because they don't spend enough money on real people moderating and thinking with their head. So they put programs with words that automatically ban people or accounts. And afterwards, for example, we have the example in France with, I don't know, Twitter accounts of lawyers, for example, and they say something, and the thing doesn't please some people, The people are reporting their account in mass, and then the account is banned. And then we journalists, we say, hello, knock, 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 Twitter France, please unban, because this guy is a tremendous guy, so please. So um, I'm sorry, but I could not say that in France we are facing suppression of free speech. I don't feel it like this. I feel it like we have to see it with the law. And if you search a bit more, you're gonna see that in the EU, the European Commission, they are, I must say, quite working well now. I mean, they are making European laws that are going to force the social media platforms to moderate, but very quickly, some contents, but not with the machines, with real people. So it may work at the end. I mean, at the end, I think that Zuckerberg, Jack, and all that people are going to spend money. They have money, so they can spend it, and the moderation is going to be more precise. But
I worry, Gilles, I worry about the, I mean, just to go back earlier, so we're focusing on social media, but what about we're talking about the photographs of police during manifestation.
yeah,
So the laws that make it, if it's basically the preemptive arrests of anyone who attempts to capture an image of a police, that is a suppression of free speech.
Yes,
if you consider images a form of speech, right?
Yes. Well, you had a very few example of this. I mean, what the police did was, again, sometimes using the pandemic or using false motivation about I don't know, they use tear gas. Okay, they are using tear gas. The journalist wants to do his job. He wants to be able to see his screen because it's a digital camera. Okay, so he's bringing a mask, and as soon as he brings a mask, the police is saying, no, no, no. If you bring your mask, it's because you want to throw things and you want to be able to resist about the police, and you're a rioter. So
right,
there is a real problem about this. And here we had another example very recently. I prepared a tweet with this, but I'm not going to share my screen, but just going to tell you about it. It was another demonstrations, a very recent demonstration, what was called La Marche des Libertés. And you had 88 demonstrations in France about this. And what they did in Paris was amazing, amazingly stupid. You had a demonstration, okay, and they were quite static. And what they did, they brought music. I mean, huge sound machines to do a lot of noise. And the police arrested them with saying that these people were doing a non-authorized rave party. I mean, that's insane. That's totally insane. So, but when I saw that afterwards, it made me, I was really angry. But in a certain way, I was laughing because when you have the state doing this, it means that they they don't know how to act anymore. I mean, and they're doing messy things. You know, this was a messy thing. It was not intelligent. It was not. I mean, it was not protecting people. It was like, which article in my law can I use to mute these people? Okay, they are putting some music. Okay, we are in the pandemic. You cannot do a rave party with many people dancing, so we can arrest them. Oh my God, that was so stupid. So, in a certain way, it's a sign of the power not knowing what to do, and this kind of fresh. I mean, fresh because it means that we, the people, we still have some bullets. I mean, some ideas of what to do. Fortunately, I know that we are not going to march on the Senate or the Assemblée nationale, and I'm really happy about the election of Biden in the U.S. And I hope that with you're going to turn the page quite quickly.
On verra bien. We'll
On
see.
verra bien. We'll see.
Well, thank you so much, Gilles, for staying with us a few extra minutes to unpack.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
And thank you all, those of you who are still here. Thank you all for sticking around. And we really appreciated your participation in this panel. Really great questions. And thank you again to Hope and to Volha for organizing this. It's just been so cool to connect with journalists, activists around the world and think about what it looks like to have a kind of globally connected protest culture. So thank you so much. Any last words, Hope?
Other than thank you to Gilles, and thank you, Michael. Absolutely, and of course to Volha, who is in the number of attendees here today. We wish you were here with us. It'd be good to see your face as well. But I see there's one more. Oh, Josie says thank you as well. So yes, I think we're probably good to go off record there, Frank.